I can still hear the echo of Robert's hammer if I close my eyes. It's faint now, softened by time, but it's there, the steady rhythm of it, ringing through the summer air of 1982. We were standing in the middle of an empty lot back then, just a patch of stubborn earth with wild grass up to our knees. Robert had a bandana tied around his forehead to keep the sweat from dripping into his eyes. He was grinning like a boy about to build a treehouse, though what he was really building was the place where our whole lives would happen. The house cost $78,000. At the time, it might as well have been $7 million. I remember the way my fingers trembled when I signed the papers. Our mortgage came to $550 a month, an amount that made my throat tighten every time I wrote the check. I'd sit at the kitchen table in our cramped apartment, the smell of fried onions still clinging to my clothes from my diner shift, and whisper, "Please let it clear, just let it clear." Robert never worried like I did. He had this unshakable faith that things would work out, that as long as we worked hard and loved each other, we'd be fine. And somehow, we were. The night we finally moved in, the house wasn't finished. Not even close. There were gaps in the window frames, wires hanging like vines from the ceiling. We had one mattress laid on the floor of what would someday be our bedroom, and nothing else. But Robert brought in an old lamp from his workshop, plugged it into the only working outlet, and we sat cross-legged on the mattress eating cold fried chicken from a paper bag. The air smelled like sawdust and new beginnings. "This is ours," he whispered, his arm looped around my shoulders. And I believed him. For decades, this house was more than wood and shingles. It was our proof, our testament. The kitchen was the first thing we made whole. Cheap pine cabinets with little brass knobs Robert polished with an old t-shirt every Saturday. I can still see Daniel, just a toddler then, sitting on the floor in his overalls while I stirred spaghetti sauce, his matchbox cars zigzagging across the linoleum. He left tiny dents in the baseboards when he crashed them. I never fixed them. I didn't want to erase him from the walls. We paid off the mortgage in 2004. 22 years of worry and double shifts, and then one morning, Robert walked into the kitchen holding the letter from the bank. "We own it outright," he said, his voice cracking just a little. I can't explain the pride in that moment. We weren't rich. We never were. But we had built something together, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. It was ours. Robert's been gone 12 years now. The house feels bigger without him, like its rooms echo too much. Sometimes I walk through them at night, trailing my hand along the doorframes he sanded smooth. It comforts me. Reminds me of who we were. Daniel is here now. Back home, at 35. He moved in 3 months ago after losing his job in real estate. He said it was just until he got back on his feet. He came through the front door with 3 suitcases, a laptop bag, and that restless energy of his, like he's always mid-conversation in his head. At first, I liked having him here again. The house felt less hollow. The air buzzed with life. But lately, it's different. This morning, I found him in the living room, standing with his arms folded across his chest, staring at the fireplace. He's tall, like his father, but sharper somehow, more angles than curves. "You ever think about updating this place?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes calculating. "Updating?" I repeated, still holding my coffee like it might steady me. "Yeah. You know, open up the walls, modernize it. People want open concepts now. This," he gestured around at the floral curtains and the well-worn couch, "feels kind of old-fashioned." I looked at the room through his eyes for a moment. The floral drapes Robert picked out in '96 when he got that surprise bonus. The couch that sags in the middle from decades of bodies curled into it. The dent in the baseboard where Daisy, our old golden retriever, used to scratch when she wanted out. Old-fashioned. "I like it this way," I said softly. "It feels like home." Daniel gave a small laugh, but it wasn't cruel. "Sure, Mom. I get that. This place could be worth so much more if you let me do something with it. You know it's probably worth, what, $420,000 now?" Maybe more. The number made my chest tighten. I knew the value had gone up. Neighbors on both sides sold for over $400,000 last year, but hearing it out loud made it sound fragile, like something that could be whisked away if I wasn't careful. I stayed quiet, watching him run his hand along the mantel like a realtor. After he went out to take a call, I sat in the armchair, tracing the worn wood with my thumb. This house used to feel like part of me. Lately, it feels like something I'm squatting in, waiting for someone younger to tell me how to live here. Robert would have known what to say. He had a way of setting boundaries without sounding like he was setting them. Me. I've always been softer. Too eager to keep the peace, even if it costs me my peace. That evening, while I was peeling carrots for stew, Daniel came back into the kitchen, phone still in hand. You know, he said, you could pull out like $100,000 in equity. Just refinance or do a cash out. Rates aren't terrible right now. I could handle it for you. I froze, the carrot peeler halfway down an orange ribbon. Why would I need $100,000? You could travel. Redo the house. Or just not worry about money. He smiled like he was offering me a gift. Think about it, $100,000 sitting in your bank account. I'm not worried about money, I said quietly. He paused, then looked at me with that intense stare he gets. You could be living easier, Mom. You don't have to cling to this old way of doing things. Cling. The word sliced through me sharper than it should have. Because maybe he's right, I do cling. To routines, to memories, to this house like it's a lifeboat. But I also know what it cost us. Not just $78,000, but years of double shifts, of Robert coming home with sawdust in his hair, of me staying up late with the checkbook praying the mortgage check wouldn't bounce. I can't imagine trading all of that for numbers on a screen. Daniel sighed when I didn't answer. Anyway, just think about it. You'd have options. I could get it set up if you trust me. He said it lightly, but it landed heavy. After he went upstairs, I stood alone in the kitchen. The overhead light hummed faintly. I pressed my palms flat on the counter, the cool tile biting into my skin. Do I trust him? Of course. He's my son. And yet. There's something in his tone lately, something sharp, almost hungry. Like he's looking at the house not as a home, but as an asset. Like he's looking at me not as his mother, but as an obstacle. The thought makes my stomach turn. I tell myself I'm imagining it. That he wants what's best for me. That he's just trying to help. But somewhere deeper, where the truth whispers, a voice says, be careful. That night, I lay awake in bed long after the house went still. The moonlight stretched pale across the floorboards Robert laid with his own hands. The house creaked softly, as if shifting in its sleep. This place once held everything I loved. Now I wonder if it might be the thing that tears us apart. Daniel's words echo as I drift toward uneasy sleep. You could get at least $100,000 in equity cash if you just let me handle it. I want to believe he means well. But for the first time in my life, I'm not sure I can. I still remember the way the new locks clicked that first night. It wasn't loud, not really, it was just different. Sharper. A cold, metallic sound that didn't belong to this house. Daniel had said it like it was nothing, like swapping out the doorknobs of my own front door was just part of a modernizing. Mom, anyone could pick those old ones with a hairpin, he'd laughed, waving his phone to show me how he could now unlock everything from an app. These new smart locks are safer. You should thank me. And I did. Or at least, I smiled, the way I always do when I don't know what else to do. Thank you, sweetheart, I'd said, even though my fingers twitched to touch the brass knob Robert had installed back in '83, the year after we bought this house. I still remember standing in the hallway while Robert screwed it in, pausing to kiss me with sawdust in his hair. Back then, I thought everything in this house would outlive me. But now, little pieces were vanishing. At first, Daniel's presence felt almost comforting. He'd bring home groceries, though mostly things I didn't eat, and plop a few bills on the counter like a bachelor tossing scraps to the house fairy. He called it rent, said he'd give me $500 every month to help out. Only, he didn't. That first month, he forgot, because his unemployment check was delayed. The next month he said he had to cover his car insurance, $280 for 6 months, Mom, it's a deal. And I nodded, telling myself it didn't matter. He was my boy. He needed a soft place to land. Still, there were new packages arriving almost every day. Big ones. Heavy boxes with brand logos I didn't recognize. One evening, I walked into the living room and found him tearing apart the old oak coffee table, Robert's coffee table, claiming it was warped beyond saving. He had a new glass one waiting by the door, all sleek edges and chrome legs. It looked like something that belonged in a hotel lobby, not the room where my babies had once played with wooden blocks on a braided rug. Mom, the whole place looks ancient, he said, tugging the rug aside with his foot. You gotta let me update things. People expect better these days. People? What people? I didn't ask. I just pressed my lips together and carried the old table's pieces out to the garage, where Robert's tools still hung in perfect order like soldiers waiting for a war that had already ended. Then the mail started coming. It was subtle at first, a glossy envelope here, a thick manila packet there. All of it addressed to Daniel Properties LLC. I stared at the name on one particularly heavy stack while standing at the mailbox in my slippers. The words felt strange in my mouth as I whispered them aloud. My Daniel, a company? When I asked, he laughed. It's just something I'm setting up for tax stuff. Don't worry about it. Tax stuff. That was what Robert used to call anything he didn't want to explain. So, I didn't push. I wanted to believe Daniel knew what he was doing. He'd always been so sure of himself, ever since he was little, standing on a chair to stir pancake batter while declaring he'd grow up to be a millionaire before 30. He was 35 now. Unemployed. And yet, there was a kind of manic sparkle in his eyes these days, as if he was on the edge of something big. Mrs. Atkins noticed before I did. She's lived next door since '89, her lilac bushes spilling through the fence like gossip. She caught me outside one afternoon, sorting recycling, when she nodded toward the line of delivery boxes on my porch. He's up to something, she said softly, leaning on her cane. Just, be careful what you sign, dear. I tried to laugh it off. Oh, Daniel's just trying to help. She didn't smile back. Help can be expensive. Her words stuck to me like burrs. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if Robert would have seen these cracks sooner. He had always been the cautious one. He'd triple-check interest rates, scribble columns of numbers on yellow legal pads before committing to anything. Even our very first mortgage, a mere $78,000, he treated like a solemn oath. For 22 years, we paid $550 every single month, never late, not even once. I used to slip the check into the mailbox like placing an offering at an altar. We owned this house free and clear by 2004, and I thought that meant something. I thought it meant security. Daniel installed security cameras the next week. Little black orbs tucked into the corners of the porch and living room, glowing red like watchful eyes. Peace of mind, he said, clicking away on his phone. We're in a high-value neighborhood now, Mom. This place is worth, what, $420? $450? About that, I murmured, surprised he knew the number. Exactly. So we should treat it like an asset. An asset. Not a home. I felt my throat tighten, but I said nothing as he stripped the floral curtains from the windows and replaced them with minimalist gray panels that looked like something from a corporate rental listing. The thing is, part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to think he was being proactive, visionary, ambitious even. After Robert died, the house had gone still, like it was holding its breath. Daniel's energy, chaotic as it was, filled the silence. It was easier to let him move the furniture than to face how empty everything had become. And I told myself, this is what good mothers do. They adapt. They make space. Even when it hurts. But then came the papers. I found them on the kitchen table late one Tuesday evening, tucked between a pile of circulars and an empty coffee mug. My name was printed in block letters across the top, bold and clinical. Quitclaim deed, transfer of interest. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I could see the blank line where my signature was meant to go, and beneath it, Daniel's, already scrawled in thick black ink that I read it 3 times, the words slipping through me like cold water. Quitclaim. Interest. Transfer. It was as if the house, the place where I had rocked my babies, buried my husband's ashes beneath the maple tree, celebrated every Christmas and every scraped knee, had been quietly reclassified as property. His property. Mom? Daniel's voice startled me from the doorway. He was holding another stack of mail, grinning. "Oh, hey, you found that," he said, nodding at the papers in my hand. "Listen, it's just a formality. Makes it easier to leverage the equity. We could pull, like, 100 grand, easy." 100 grand, I echoed, my voice hollow. "Yeah. And you wouldn't have to worry about bills anymore. I could handle it all." He leaned down, kissing my cheek like he was offering me a gift. Trust me. Trust me, the words used to feel safe when he said them. Now they sounded like the first creak of a floorboard in a dark, empty house. That night, after he went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen with the deed spread out under the dim yellow light. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I traced my name on the page with one finger, like testing the edge of a blade. For years, I'd told myself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping my family. That swallowing my doubts made me strong. But as I sat there, my hands cold against the formica, I realized I couldn't remember the last time Daniel had said the word home without following it with value. I slid the papers back into their envelope and tucked them beneath the bread box, as if burying something fragile. I told myself I'd talk to him in the morning. I told myself I was just tired. But deep down, I knew. Something had shifted. And once the foundation starts to crack, the whole house remembers how to tremble. The next morning, Daniel was already gone, but his laptop was open on the counter, showing a real estate website with our house's photo on it, and a bright red button that said, "List property." I woke to the smell of coffee and the sharp click of Daniel's laptop keys. The morning light slanted through the kitchen blinds, striping the countertop in pale gold. For a moment, it felt like any other quiet day, until I saw the folder. The quitclaim deed sat between us like a live wire. "Morning, Mom," Daniel said, not looking up. His voice had that falsely casual tone he used when he was wound tight. "So, I talked to the bank again. If your name's off the title, they can move forward on the refinance. They'll give me 100,000. Cash." He finally met my eyes, his grin stretched a little too wide. 100,000, Mom. Imagine what we could do. We. The word was supposed to soothe me. Instead, it set off a faint ringing in my ears. He launched into it the way he used to explain science projects in middle school, rattling off phrases like cash-out refinance and home equity leverage while my coffee grew cold. He even had a spreadsheet open, with columns of imagined profits from the family business he said he would start: property management, short-term rentals, maybe even a home renovation company. I could flip a few places, get some passive income going, he said, tapping the numbers like they were sacred. "I'm telling you, this is how people build wealth. And I'll take care of you forever, Mom. No more stressing about utilities or taxes. I've got this." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to wrap those words around me like a blanket, "I'll take care of you forever." But underneath, something coiled tight. The same quiet dread I'd felt watching him carry out Robert's coffee table like a piece of junk. I don't know, Daniel," I said softly, folding my hands in my lap. "This house is all I have. It's where." "It's just paperwork," he snapped, too quickly. "It doesn't change anything. You'd still live here, obviously." His voice softened, slipping into that boyish charm that always cracked my resolve. "Please, Mom. Don't you trust me?" The word trust lodged in my throat like a stone. Of course I trusted him. He was my son. But why did it feel like he was asking me to erase myself? After he left for the gym, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the deed. My name was printed across the top in thick black ink, Margaret L. Hayes, and I thought about how long it had taken me to become that person. 40 years of raising children, working part-time at the library, clipping coupons when Robert got laid off in '91, scraping together the last $550 mortgage payment in 2004 with tears in my eyes. I had earned this roof. Every shingle, every nail. And yet, my own son wanted me to sign it away like it was nothing more than a signature on a store receipt. I called Gloria. Gloria had been my best friend since high school, and though time had stolen the bounce from her steps, her voice still carried that no-nonsense snap of a woman who'd spent 30 years as a paralegal. "Don't you dare sign a thing," she said the moment I explained. "Not without independent legal counsel. I don't care if it's your son or the Pope, get your own lawyer." "But he says it's just for refinancing," I murmured. "That's how it starts," she said. "If your name's off the title, you lose all legal rights to the property. If he defaults, the bank can take your house, and you'd be a guest here at best." "A guest," I whispered, and the word chilled me. Gloria sighed. "I know you love him. But love doesn't pay the mortgage, Margaret. Paperwork does." Daniel came home that afternoon riding a wave of restless energy. He smelled of sweat and cologne, like he'd been trying to outrun something. "Did you look at the numbers I made?" he asked, setting down a takeout bag with a thump. "We could pull the cash by next week if we move fast. They've already pre-approved me. $100,000, Mom. Think about it." "I did think about it," I said quietly. He paused, fries halfway to his mouth. "And? I think I need to talk to a lawyer first." Silence cracked through the kitchen like lightning. His face changed. Not all at once, but like a mask slipping, confusion first, then disbelief, then something darker. "You don't trust me," he said, flat and cold. "That's not it." "Yes it is." He shoved the fries aside, eyes blazing. "After everything I've done, after all the plans I've made, you're saying you think I'd screw you over." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He pushed back from the table so hard the chair legs screeched. "You still see me like some screw-up, don't you? Some little boy who can't handle life without mommy holding his hand." "Daniel." "Forget it," he said, grabbing his keys. "If you don't want my help, fine. Stay stuck in this mausoleum." And just like that, he was gone. The screen door slammed so hard the lilacs outside shivered. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding. The house hummed with silence, like it was holding its breath again. I wanted to run after him, to apologize, to make it right. But another voice, quieter, steadier, rose beneath the panic. I had said no. Softly, trembling, but still, no. For the first time, I hadn't smoothed it over. I hadn't folded my worry into a smile. And as the sunlight faded across the worn kitchen tile, I realized something. I was allowed to protect myself. Even from my own son. That night I called Gloria again, whispering like Daniel could hear me through the floorboards. "You did the right thing," she said firmly. "Get all the paperwork reviewed. And if you can, start documenting things. Dates, conversations, what he said. It matters if this gets ugly." Ugly. The word felt sour in my mouth. But I wrote it all down anyway, each word shaking as I pressed it into the page of my old recipe notebook. Quitclaim deed. Refinance. $100,000. Pre-approved. Wants my name off. I slid the notebook under my pillow like a secret. Later, as I brushed my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face looked older than I remembered, but there was something new in my eyes, something steadier. I thought of Robert again, how he used to triple-check every contract, how he'd murmur, paper protects people, Maggie. Emotions don't hold up in court. I used to tease him for being paranoid. Now I found myself whispering his words like a prayer. I went to bed just after 10. The house was quiet, the way it used to be. But as I drifted off, I heard Daniel's footsteps creak across the downstairs floorboards. Soft. Deliberate. And when I came down at dawn for coffee, still wrapped in my robe, I froze. A note lay on the counter in his blocky handwriting. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Notary coming tomorrow morning. Just sign, Mom. My stomach lurched. He wasn't going to wait for my permission. He was going to try to catch me half asleep, with a pen in my hand before I even knew what I was signing. The morning it happened, I was still half asleep. The world was soft around the edges, coffee not yet brewed, my slippers dragging on the kitchen tile, when Daniel came bustling in, all bright voice and jangling keys. Morning, Mom, he chirped. Too chipper. Hey, listen, the notary's on their way. I need you to just sign some tax paperwork real quick. Won't take a minute. I blinked, confused. Tax paperwork? For what? Oh, just some adjustments for the property taxes, he said breezily, sliding a neat stack of papers across the table. Bank needed both our signatures to update it, since you're on the deed. Just routine. I already filled out the hard parts. He kissed the top of my head before I could answer. Don't worry. I'll handle everything. A woman in a navy blazer appeared at the door not 5 minutes later. She had a shiny leather case and a clipped, efficient smile. Mobile notary, she said, as though that explained everything. I remember thinking she smelled like peppermint gum. I remember how my robe belt had come loose, how I felt small and frayed in the doorway. Daniel was all charm and quick jokes, pointing to where I should sign and initial while the woman flipped pages and notarized them with crisp, practiced motions. And I signed. Sleep still fogged my mind. My glasses were upstairs on the nightstand. The letters on the page might as well have been a foreign language. It wasn't until the woman left, her heels clicking across the porch, that I finally said, "Wait, what exactly did I just sign?" Daniel grinned, gathering the papers into his bag. Relax, Mom. You worry too much. Weeks passed quietly. Almost suspiciously so. Daniel was different. He stopped asking me what I wanted for dinner. Stopped lingering in the living room to watch old movies with me. Stopped speaking in "we" sentences. Instead, he started locking his bedroom door. Taking calls on the back porch in low, clipped tones. Checking the mail before I could get to it. I told myself he was just busy. Building something. Growing up. But then, one Tuesday morning, I opened a plain white envelope from the bank, and the floor beneath me cracked wide open. The letter was crisp, clinical. Confirmation of cash-out refinance. Loan amount, $100,000. Monthly payment, $1,250. Borrower of record, Daniel Hayes. My name was gone. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some clerical error that would be fixed with a phone call. He had done it. Daniel had taken my name off the title. And he had taken out $100,000, against the house Robert and I had scraped and bled to own outright. I read the letter 3 times, then set it down like it might burn me. Somewhere in the house, Daniel's laughter rose from behind his closed door, muffled and distant, like a stranger's voice. I confronted him that evening. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the bank letter. Daniel, I said, standing in the doorway of his room, what is this? He glanced up from his phone, frowning. What's what? This. My voice cracked. The refinance. The loan. My name is gone. Something flickered in his eyes, guilt, but it vanished so fast I wondered if I'd imagined it. Oh, he said lightly, yeah. I had to move fast before rates went up. It's fine. Fine? I whispered. You took me off the title. He set his phone down and leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Look, Mom. It's done. The house is technically in my name now. You're still living here, obviously, but legally, he shrugged. You're kind of a guest. The word hit like a slap. Guest. This is my home, I said, barely hearing my own voice. Robert and I. Robert's gone, Daniel snapped. The air went silent. He had never said it like that before. Cold. Flat. Like a door slamming shut. Then he pulled open a drawer and tossed a thick packet of papers onto the bedspread. Here, he said. That's the new mortgage, $1,250 a month. So if you're going to stay here, I'll need you to start contributing, say, $800 a month rent. Fair's fair. I stared at him. My heart felt like glass about to shatter. Rent? I whispered. He stood, towering over me now. I can't carry everything on my own, Mom. I'm not made of money. This isn't the 80s anymore. I don't have $800 a month, I said, the words hollow. Then figure it out. He turned away, already done with the conversation. You've been living here for free long enough. Free. That was what he thought this had been, me living here, for free, in the house where I'd raised him, fed him, wiped his tears when the world broke his heart. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, staring at the familiar wallpaper roses while my body buzzed like a struck bell. How had I not seen it coming? How had I not protected myself? Worse, how had I doubted my instincts long enough to sign those papers? This wasn't just about the house. It was about the quiet, terrible realization blooming in my chest. I couldn't trust myself anymore. Grief settled over me like a damp wool blanket. Not the grief of death, though in a way, it was that, too. It was the death of something I had built. The belief that love alone would keep us safe. The faith that my son would never hurt me. The illusion that my home was mine, unshakable. Now the walls themselves felt hostile. Every creak sounded like a warning. Every framed photo on the mantel seemed to watch me with pity. I barely slept that night. 2 days later, Daniel slid an envelope under my door. I thought it was an apology. I hoped, foolishly, it might be. Instead, it was printed on clean white paper, signed and dated like a business transaction. 30-day notice to vacate. I read it 3 times, numb. He hadn't even handed it to me like a human being. Just slipped it under the door like junk mail. There was a line at the bottom that said, Landlord's signature, Daniel Hayes. Landlord. My own son had signed his name like a landlord evicting a stranger. I sat there on the floor, the paper trembling in my hands, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if Daniel had ever really seen me as his mother, or just as an obstacle standing in his way. And deep down, in the cold quiet of my chest, I knew. If I didn't fight for myself now, I might lose everything. The door clicked softly behind me as I pulled it shut, not daring to let it slam. It was early morning, the kind of quiet hour when the world feels half asleep and fragile. My suitcase wheels made a hollow sound on the porch boards as I dragged them across the place Robert once knelt to replace a rotting plank. I could still see his weathered hands in my mind, the way they moved gently but firmly, steady as if the house could feel pain and he was careful not to hurt it. I had packed my whole life, 40 years of birthdays, Christmas mornings, and summer storms, into 2 faded suitcases and the leather purse I'd carried since 1999. I didn't tell Daniel I was leaving. There was no point. The house didn't belong to me anymore, and he had made sure I knew it. 30 days, he had said, sliding the notice across the kitchen table with the same casual indifference you'd use to pass the salt. The son I once rocked to sleep had looked at me with eyes as cold and glassy as the surface of the old dining room china cabinet. I stepped onto the sidewalk with the first hint of dawn brushing the sky in muted pink. The air was sharp, almost metallic, like the air after a storm when the ground is still wet. My taxi driver, a young man with a scruffy beard and soft brown eyes, lifted my suitcases into the trunk without saying much. I was grateful for his silence. I was afraid that if he spoke kindly, if he asked if I was okay, I might dissolve right there on the curb. The studio apartment was nothing more than a single square room with thin walls and a window that overlooked the back of a laundromat. It cost me $1,200 a month, an absurd price for such a cramped place, but it was the only month-to-month furnished rental I could find on short notice. I handed over the deposit and first month's rent, $400 in total, with hands that trembled, though not from age. As the landlord counted the bills, I kept thinking about how Robert and I had once paid just $550 a month for our mortgage, how we used to celebrate making it through another year without falling behind. That night, I lay on the stiff twin bed staring at the cracked ceiling, surrounded by the smell of other people's lives. The sheets smelled faintly of bleach and lemon, too clean, like they were trying to erase any trace of whoever had come before me. I clutched my purse to my chest as if it could anchor me, as if the weight of it could remind me I still existed. Inside it were the last fragments of who I used to be, my worn leather checkbook, the key to a house that was no longer mine, and the manila envelope holding our original mortgage payoff certificate from 2004. The next morning, I slipped back to the house while Daniel was at work. My heart pounded as I unlocked the side door with the spare key he didn't know I still had. I wasn't there to fight or to plead. I just wanted what was left of me. In the back of the hall closet, behind old winter coats that still smelled faintly of cedar, I found the cardboard box where I had kept our life, photo albums with brittle pages, our marriage certificate, Robert's death certificate, and all the financial folders I had once organized so meticulously. The box was lighter than I remembered. It shocked me how little physical space an entire life could take up once love and laughter had been wrung out of it. I carried it out quietly, half expecting the house to cry out, to betray me for stealing what little was mine. It didn't. It just stood there silently as I walked away, its windows blank and unblinking, the flowers in the front garden drooping under their own weight. Back in the studio, I set the box on the table and opened the albums one by one. The photographs stared back at me like witnesses. There was Robert on the day we closed on the house in 1982, holding the keys in one hand and cradling baby Daniel in the other, his eyes shining with a pride that made my chest ache. There was Daniel at 8, with freckles scattered like stardust across his nose, holding a wriggling puppy in the backyard. There was me, younger than my granddaughter is now, with hair the color of dark honey and a smile that didn't yet know what betrayal felt like. I spiraled in those days. I stopped answering phone calls, stopped opening the curtains, stopped eating anything more than toast. I sat in that cramped room watching the light shift from morning to night like waves rolling over me. I wondered if this was what I deserved, if maybe I had been too soft, too trusting, too desperate to keep peace that I had lost myself entirely. Maybe this was the price of loving someone so much you forget where you end and they begin. It was Gloria who shook me out of it. She called every day until I finally picked up. Her voice came through the phone like a warm shawl wrapped around my shoulders. "Margaret," she said firmly, "this is not your fault. This is financial abuse. You hear me? Elder financial abuse. He took advantage of your trust. You didn't deserve this." Her words cracked something open inside me. I cried then, loud and shaking sobs that scraped my throat raw. Gloria let me cry. She didn't rush me. She only said, "You are not weak because you were kind." She told me to contact legal aid, that there were attorneys who specialized in cases like mine. I argued at first, saying it was too late, that the house was gone. But Gloria, who had spent decades as a paralegal, told me that signatures gained through deception could be contested. "You still have the old deed, right?" she asked. I told her I did. It was tucked in my purse, its paper worn soft from years of being folded and unfolded. "Then you have proof," she said simply, as if the matter were settled. That night, I took stock of what I had left. My bank statement showed $36,400 remaining in my retirement savings. I had already spent $3,600 on 3 months of rent, and it scared me how quickly the numbers could shrink. I had always been careful with money, always saving for rainy days, but I had never imagined a storm like this. Still, something inside me had shifted. The grief was still there, heavy and hollow, but beneath it was the faintest ember of something else, resolve. For the first time since Robert died, I wasn't thinking only of survival. I was thinking about justice, about reclaiming even a fragment of what had been taken. The next morning, I booked an appointment with an elder law attorney. My fingers trembled as I typed my name into the online form, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something that almost felt like courage. When I pressed confirm, a message popped up with the date and time, Tuesday at 10 a.m., and I sat back in the creaky studio chair with my heart pounding like it hadn't in years. I set the appointment confirmation on the table beside the deed, smoothing the worn paper with my palm. The document still bore both our signatures, mine and Robert's, in the neat careful handwriting of younger versions of ourselves who had believed the world was safe. I touched his name with my fingertips and whispered, "I'm trying, Robert. I'm still trying." The studio was silent except for the faint hum of the laundromat machine spinning below. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like it was swallowing me. It felt like it was waiting, for me. I wasn't sure if I would ever get the house back. But I knew this much, would no longer let my love be used as a weapon against me. And with that thought, I zipped my purse shut, its weight now carrying not just memories, but proof, and placed it by the door, ready for Tuesday. The first time I walked into Ms. Patel's office I felt like I had stepped into a place where decisions get made. The walls held framed diplomas and a photograph of a calm sea. Ms. Patel was brisk and direct, sharp blouse, sharper eyes, handshake that made me sit up straighter. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her, the hammer and sawdust, $78,000 in 1982, $550 a month that made soup feel like a luxury, the mortgage payoff letter from 2004, the box of photo albums, the mail to Daniel Properties LLC, the notary in my kitchen, the paper I had signed half asleep. She read the quitclaim deed twice, pinched her nose, and then looked at me. "This is coercion, Margaret," she said. "Or at minimum, undue influence. You may not have given informed consent." Those words gave my shame a shape. Legal language did something my fear couldn't, it turned Hayes into something we could fight. She explained the steps: file a civil petition to void the quitclaim, request a lease pendens to cloud the title so no sale or foreclosure could proceed, and gather evidence, bank records, delivery receipts, texts, witness statements. "We need dates," she said. "We need documentation. Legal work isn't free," she added. "My firm requires a $2,500 retainer to start." The figure landed like a small stone in my chest. I had $40,000 in retirement, enough for a modest life, but not endless funds. Still, she was firm, timing mattered. I paid the retainer. Gloria had made me buy a small spiral notebook and insisted I track everything, so I wrote, "Retainer, Ms. Patel, $2,500, 6/12." The act of writing steadied me. It felt like lacing shoes after months indoors. Within a week we filed the petition. Ms. Patel's paralegal took photos of the new locks and cameras. They subpoenaed bank records and requested Daniel's transaction history. They told me to save every text, voicemail, and receipt. Daniel noticed. His texts grew sharper. "You're ruining my credit," he wrote. "Do you know how hard I've worked? You're selfish." Another, "If this goes to court, you'll regret it. Think about the family." The messages looped in my head, sonorous and accusing, until I sometimes couldn't tell if they were from my child or a stranger. And yet, Ms. Patel called with small victories. The judge allowed our request for a lease pendens hearing. When the lease pendens was filed, I felt a little room to breathe. For a moment the house didn't seem like it might swallow me whole. I also started therapy. Dr. Haroon asked the questions my defenses couldn't answer. How long have you been trying to be nice, at the expense of your own needs? Sessions cost money, another ledger entry, but they helped. I wrote his phrases into the margins of an old recipe book. "Boundaries are not betrayals. You deserve protection." The sentences threaded through me like a rope. Gloria was my constant. She brought sandwiches to the attorney meetings and sat with me while a bank investigator reviewed transactions. "Looks like $40,000 moved out of the account recently," the investigator said, sliding a printout across the table. $40,000. I felt my stomach drop. "Where?" I asked. "Multiple transfers," he said. "Some to unknown accounts. We'll trace it." I began a daily log: date, time, conversation, who was present, what was said. I wrote Daniel's promises and departures, his phone calls and the small details that showed pattern. Recording facts, cold facts, pulled me out of the fog of shame. Miss Patel also taught me small, practical things that felt like armor. She told me how a lease pendens works, how it puts a public notice on the title to warn any buyer or bank that ownership is contested, effectively freezing attempts to sell or foreclose while the court decides. She instructed me to forward every text to her office, to print emails, to make photocopies of receipts. "Paper wins," she said simply, and I began to believe it. Gloria and I sat at my kitchen table one evening with a pile of bank statements and printed screenshots, her fingers tapping the page as if beating a rhythm of proof. I was learning to advocate for myself, not apologize for simply existing anymore. There were nights when testifying felt unbearable. How do you tell a room of strangers about your own son? What if the judge believed the wrong story? I practiced in the living room until my voice mattered less than the truth itself. Miss Patel told me, quietly, "You won't testify to ruin him. You'll testify to the truth. The law cares about consent. If you signed when you didn't understand, the court can void that instrument." That reassured me, not because it removed fear, but because it gave purpose to it. I wasn't airing private wounds for cruelty, I was seeking a legal fix to a legal wrong. My little notebook filled: retainer $2,500, 6/12, taxi to attorney $24, copies $18, therapy $120, parking $6. Money was leaving the account in pursuit of a return that wasn't financial: peace, possession, a chance to be more than a guest in the home Robert and I built. The texts from Daniel continued. Some nights they came one after another: "You're ruining my life. You always pick the easy option. Family first, Mom." The words hurt. Then I would cross them out in the record and write what he actually did: dates, amounts, transfers. Seeing the pattern made the manipulation less like a ghost and more like something I could name. When the court set a hearing date, the paper felt heavy in my hands. Testifying about him would be the hardest thing I'd done. But closing the spiral notebook that night, I found a line I had written in blue ink: "I am learning to say no." Small, stubborn, true. It felt like a match struck in damp tinder, unlikely maybe, but it would burn. The hearing was scheduled. I would speak about coercion, about a notary in the early morning, about signing without glasses on a table that smelled of coffee. I would say it aloud: I did not give informed consent. It wasn't the end. It was only the next step. But for the first time in months, when I turned out the lamp and lay in the dark, I didn't feel like the floor had been pulled from beneath me. I felt like I was standing on something I had built myself, one small plank at a time. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. Its ceilings loomed high and gray like an overcast sky, and each echoing footstep reminded me how far I had come from the warm creak of my own wooden floors. I clutched my leather notebook, the one where I had written every date, every amount, every cruel text, as if it were a shield. Miss Patel walked beside me, her heels clicking like punctuation marks, her voice low and steady: "Stay calm. We present facts. Let him perform. The judge will see." I tried to nod, but my body hummed like a taut wire. My son would be in that room. Not the boy who used to sit cross-legged in pajamas watching Saturday morning cartoons with milk mustaches, but the man who took my home like someone claiming a prize. When they called our case, I rose. My legs trembled, but they carried me. Daniel was already at the respondent's table. He looked polished. Crisp navy suit, new haircut, silver cufflinks catching the light. He glanced up, caught my eye, and offered a cold, practiced smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. I felt my heart crack a little, because I knew that smile. It was the one his father used to give realtors when we were trying to hide how desperate we were to close on the house. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Reyes, began with procedure. Voices droned, petitioner Margaret Thompson. Respondent Daniel Thompson. I kept breathing. In. Out. In. Out. Then Daniel spoke. He didn't stumble. He didn't falter. He painted his story in smooth, confident strokes. My mother has been struggling mentally, he said. She gets confused, forgets things. She wanted to gift me the house before it became too much for her. I handled the refinance for her benefit. Gift. For her benefit. My fingers tightened around my pen until my knuckles ached. He was rewriting the story of my life in front of strangers. My throat burned. Judge Reyes raised an eyebrow. Do you have documentation of her intent to gift the property? Daniel smiled slightly, like he had been waiting for that. Verbal intent, Your Honor. She told me herself. I was just trying to protect her. The room tilted for a moment. Verbal intent. How do you disprove a lie spun from nothing? Miss Patel stood then, and her presence filled the space like a tide rolling in. Your Honor, she said, we have contemporaneous medical records showing Miss Thompson's full cognitive competence, annual exam from February, clean neurological screening from March. We also have proof that Mr. Thompson deposited $100,000 in equity proceeds into his personal account, then spent roughly $40,000 on luxury items, a Tesla down payment, an $8,000 home theater system, and several high-end electronics. She slid the bank statements forward. The clerk stamped them. I watched the judge's eyes narrow. Additionally, Ms. Patel continued, we have evidence that Ms. Thompson signed the quitclaim deed under false pretenses. The notary visit was unannounced, and she believed she was signing tax paperwork. This is a textbook case of undue influence. There was silence, the kind that buzzes in your ears. Daniel's jaw tensed. He shifted his weight. For the first time, he looked less like a polished businessman and more like a cornered boy. Judge Reyes flipped through the exhibits. Her tone cooled. I am freezing all remaining equity funds in a restricted account pending resolution, she said. This matter will proceed to court-ordered mediation before trial. Her gavel came down with a sharp crack. The sound echoed in my chest. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollowed out. Because Daniel just sat there, expression smooth, unreadable, and for the first time in my life, he looked like a stranger wearing my son's face. He turned to me as the judge left. His eyes were glacial. You think this is over, he muttered. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He stood and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking across the courtroom floor. I stayed seated, my knees unwilling to hold me. Miss Patel placed a hand on my shoulder. You did well, she said softly. Did I? I had told the truth. But the truth didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. We walked out into the corridor, and the building seemed colder than when I came in. I stopped by a tall window, staring down at the courthouse lawn where pigeons strutted like they owned the earth. Ms. Patel spoke about the mediation schedule and document production, but her words floated just above me, like distant bells. Because something had shifted. I had walked into that courtroom still clinging to a thin, desperate hope, that somewhere underneath all his sharpness, my son was still my boy. The boy who used to ask if angels could see him when he was scared of the dark. The boy who once spent his last allowance dollar on a locket for me on Mother's Day. I had thought if he saw me there, trembling but steadfast, something might flicker in him. Some spark of recognition. Love. But the way he glared at me, it wasn't anger. It was calculation. Cold detachment. He didn't see me as his mother anymore. He saw me as an obstacle. That realization broke something in me, and freed something else. Gloria called that night. I told her everything in a flat voice, as though it had happened to someone else. She was quiet for a moment, then said, he played a role, Maggie. You told the truth. Don't let his act make you doubt your reality. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folder of evidence on my lap. I saw him, Gloria. Really saw him. Good, she said gently. You can't fight what you won't look at. When we hung up, I stayed still a long time. The courthouse fluorescent lights still seemed to glow behind my eyes. I thought about how many years I had softened myself for harmony, folded myself small so others could shine. I had believed love meant giving until I disappeared. Today, I stood up in a room where power lived, and I didn't disappear. My voice shook, but it reached the judge. That mattered. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't reread the texts or question my sanity. Instead, I opened my spiral notebook and made a new entry. Court hearing, Judge Reyes froze funds. Mediation scheduled. I spoke. I survived. Then, almost without thinking, I added another line beneath it. I am not his obstacle. I am my own advocate. The words startled me. They felt foreign on the page. But they were true. I could feel their truth humming low and steady in my bones. Daniel may still see me as an enemy. That is his choice. I see myself, at last, as someone worth defending. And tomorrow, we go to mediation. I don't know if forgiveness is possible. I don't even know if it's wise. But I will walk into that room with my head high and my voice clear, even if my heart trembles inside my chest. Because the house may be on paper in his name right now. But the story of it, the life within those walls, that's mine. And I am taking it back. The letter from the bank came folded into a plain white envelope, as if it carried nothing more than a routine update. I almost threw it into the stack of junk mail on my kitchenette counter. But the return address made my pulse quicken, First Crest Lending. My fingers trembled as I tore it open, careful not to rip the paper inside. It was short. Blunt. Cold. Foreclosure proceedings initiated on property at 1132 Willow Lane due to non-payment. I read the sentence twice, then a third time, as if the meaning might shift under the weight of my disbelief. Daniel had stopped paying. He had taken out $100,000 in equity and then, what? Just walked away from the obligation like it was a gym membership he'd forgotten to cancel? The notice included numbers. Unpaid balance, $120,487.32. Late fees accruing at $42 per day. I stared at those digits, sharp as broken glass, and felt something unfamiliar stir inside me, not triumph, not even satisfaction. Just stillness. Karma had not come with thunder or flames. It had come quietly, tucked into a single sheet of paper. 2 weeks later, the courtroom felt different. Lighter somehow, like the air had been swept clean. Judge Reyes sat with the same calm gravity, but her voice carried something almost gentle when she spoke. After reviewing the bank records, the foreclosure filings, and the evidence presented in prior hearings, this court finds the quitclaim deed invalid due to fraud and undue influence. Title will revert to the petitioner, Ms. Margaret Thompson, effective immediately. There it was. The house was mine again. The words did not hit like a victory bell. They landed like a sigh. Daniel did not attend. His attorney, a young man who looked like he hadn't slept, stood alone and said, "My client is unavailable for comment." He shuffled papers as though they might shield him from shame. Miss Patel gave me a small nod, the faintest curve of a smile, and whispered, "It's done." Done. Such a small word for something that had consumed every waking moment of my life for nearly a year. As we walked out, Miss Patel briefed me on what would come next. The bank would likely sue Daniel personally for the defaulted loan, since the funds were traced directly into his personal account. Civil fraud. Contractual breach. Words like gavel strikes. She warned me he might disappear for a while, avoid calls, slip underground. She was right. By the end of the month, he was gone. No new posts on social media. No forwarding address. Just a silence where my son used to be. Gloria called one evening to tell me the lender had filed suit against him for the $120,000 balance plus damages. Her tone was matter-of-fact, like a weather report. I thanked her and set the phone down gently, as if noise might break what was left of him. And then, one cold morning in late March, I unlocked the door of 1132 Willow Lane again. The house was, still. Empty, but not abandoned. My footsteps echoed softly across the hardwood floors Robert and I had laid down one aching weekend in 1991, sanding and sealing until our backs screamed. Sunlight fell through the front windows in wide, golden sheets, painting the air with warmth. The room smelled faintly of dust and lavender, the last scent I had left behind. I walked slowly, room by room, touching the doorframes as though greeting old friends. In the kitchen, the wallpaper was still peeling at the corner where Daniel's high chair once sat. Upstairs, the closet door in his childhood bedroom still bore faint pencil marks measuring his height through the years. All the chaos had scoured the space clean of his adult presence, the smart locks, the cameras, the new furniture. It was as though the house had been holding its breath, waiting for me to return. I expected joy. Maybe even vindication. Instead, I felt a soft ache, like the hush that follows the end of a long storm. This house had been my fortress, my burden, my battlefield. And now it was just walls again. I stood in the middle of the living room and whispered to Robert, as though he could hear me in the beams. I got it back. But I don't want to fight anymore. In April, I listed the house. It sold in 8 days for $415,000 to a young couple expecting their first baby. Watching them smile on the porch during the inspection, holding hands the way Robert and I once had, I felt something loosen in my chest. At closing, I signed the deed with a steady hand. After paying off the remaining legal fees, I deposited $300,000 into a conservative retirement account and set aside $50,000 as a safety cushion. Numbers, this time, were not chains. They were wings. My new apartment is smaller, a bright one-bedroom on the top floor of a quiet building, but it is entirely mine. No ghosts of slammed doors or shredded trust. I bought a second-hand oak table for the kitchen and set my old teacup collection along the windowsill. When sunlight hits them just right, they glow like tiny stained glass windows. Sometimes I sit there for hours, sipping chamomile, watching the light dance across porcelain. People ask if I feel vindicated. I don't. Vindication implies a contest. What I feel is peace. Peace, because I walked through fire and came out whole. Peace, because I stopped asking why my son betrayed me and started asking what I deserve from my own life. Peace, because I no longer carry the weight of trying to be everything for everyone. The house was never just wood and bricks. It was the story of who I was, and now, letting it go is the story of who I am becoming. Tonight, I am writing something I will never send. The letter lies open on the table. My handwriting is slow, deliberate. Daniel. I don't know where you are. Maybe you're hiding from lawsuits or from shame. Maybe from yourself. I want you to know I am not angry anymore. I grieve the boy I raised. I still grieve him. But I will not spend the rest of my years chained to that grief. You took the house, but not my spirit. You tried to make me small, but I became solid. I forgive you, not for you, but so I can breathe without the taste of ashes. Wherever you go, I hope you find the part of yourself that remembers how to love without taking. If you ever become that man, you may find me here, quietly living my life, not waiting but open. Mom. I set down the pen. My hands don't shake. Outside, the city hums softly, distant and unthreatening. I fold the letter, slide it into an envelope, and tuck it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Maybe I'll burn it someday. Maybe I'll keep it forever. It doesn't matter. Because this chapter is closing, and for the first time in decades, I am the one holding the pen. And tomorrow, I will wake up in a home that is not haunted, not contested, not bound to the past. It will simply be mine. The ocean doesn't roar here, it hums. A low, endless hush that slips through my open balcony doors each morning as if to remind me, you're still here. My new condo isn't big, just 2 rooms and a tiny balcony that can barely fit a table and 1 folding chair, but it's mine. Paid for, signed in my name alone. After everything that happened, I find comfort in the silence of ownership. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting the sharp jolt of panic, the kind that used to claw me awake in that rented studio, heart pounding, hands clutching at the darkness, thinking of Daniel's face when he told me I was just a guest. But now, when my eyes open, they find sunlight slipping across the pale blue walls. They find the framed photo of my garden from the old house, roses, tulips, and my stubborn lavender bush. They find the deed tucked safely in the top drawer, next to my reading glasses and a roll of lavender mints. I paid $210,000 in cash for this place. Every cent was counted twice, then wired from my account with shaking fingers. The HOA fees are $300 a month, a fraction of what I was hemorrhaging when I lived in limbo. I track each payment in a little leather-bound ledger, and each time I write that small number down, it feels like a quiet rebellion. Gloria laughed when she first visited, her eyes scanning the soft white curtains, the seashell-shaped lamp, the stack of books by the window. It's like you've built yourself a nest, she said, sipping the chamomile tea I'd made us. Mrs. Atkins came the following week and brought me a potted basil plant that's now flourishing on the kitchen sill. We've started having tea nights every Thursday, just the 3 of us. We sit around my small round table, nibbling on lemon cookies, swapping stories about everything from our worst haircuts to the strange dreams we've been having lately. The laughter is gentle, not loud or sharp. It wraps around me like a shawl. Sometimes, though, when they leave and the door clicks shut, I catch myself looking at the empty chair across from me and wondering if Daniel would even recognize me now. If he'd see the way I smile without apology, the way my shoulders aren't caved inward anymore. And then I remind myself, it doesn't matter. My healing isn't something he needs to witness to be real. One Tuesday afternoon, I wandered into the local library, just to escape the heat, and found myself lingering near a flyer board by the entrance. There, half hidden beneath an ad for piano lessons, was a printed sheet, volunteers needed, community library literacy program. I surprised myself by tearing off the little tab with their number. It's been 3 months now. Every Tuesday morning, I sit with a group of 8-year-olds and read them stories about dragons, time machines, and clever children who outsmart adults. Their eyes go wide, and their mouths fall open in delight at each plot twist. I think they like that I read slowly, savoring each word, like I'm tasting it first to make sure it's safe. And on Thursdays, before tea night, I attend a senior financial literacy group in the community center. We sit in a circle, 12 of us, all with silver hair and lined hands, and talk about powers of attorney, trusts, home titles, and how to spot coercion wrapped in love. The first time I spoke, my voice shook. I gave up my home because I thought love meant trust without questions, I told them, fingers twisting in my lap. But now I know love without boundaries isn't really love at all. It's fear wearing a mask. No one flinched. They just nodded, solemnly, like they understood in their bones. We've started creating little checklists together, steps to protect what's ours, questions to ask before signing anything. I'm learning how to teach others what I wish I'd known. Sometimes, I catch sight of my reflection in the center's glass doors as I leave, and I don't see the woman who once stood trembling in court, watching her son lie about her mind. I see someone steady. Someone quietly brave. The strangest thing is how much lighter my body feels now. Not just emotionally, I mean physically. My shoulders don't ache at night. My jaw isn't locked from clenching. I laugh more. Real laughter, not the brittle, paper-thin kind I used to use to smooth over tension. A few weeks ago, I took the framed mortgage payoff certificate from my old house, the one I once thought proved my worth, and tucked it into a box in my closet. It doesn't need to be on display anymore. That chapter closed. Now, when I want to remind myself who I am, I walk down to the beach at dusk. I kick off my sandals and stand in the wet sand as the tide creeps around my ankles, pulling gently, as if to say, you can let go now. And I do. With every wave, I let go of the woman who begged for harmony at any cost. I let go of the mother who believed her only purpose was to be needed. I let go of the guilt. The other night, I sat on my balcony with a mug of mint tea and wrote a single sentence on a note card. I pinned it above my desk, right where the morning light hits first. It says, I am allowed to exist, even if no one depends on me. It's such a simple thing, isn't it? But I read it every morning, and it feels like oxygen. I don't know where Daniel is now. Maybe he's still running from the debts, from the lawsuits, from himself. Sometimes I think about sending him the letter I wrote, the one folded inside my journal, pages soft from being read and reread, but I always stop myself. That letter isn't for him. It's for me. Proof that I survived loving someone who chose greed over family, and that I still chose to love myself afterward. This condo is quiet, yes. Sometimes achingly so. But it's peaceful quiet, not fearful quiet. And that difference has become the whole world to me. Tomorrow, I'm hosting our first official Ocean View Book Club. Gloria's bringing banana bread, Mrs. Atkins has promised her famous peach jam, and I'm making a big pot of lemon ginger tea. The women from the literacy group might come, too. There will be laughter, maybe some tears, and the scent of basil from the windowsill floating through the air. As the sun dips lower tonight, I watch the water from my balcony. The waves keep moving forward, each one erasing the trace of the one before. It feels like a metaphor too obvious to speak aloud, so I just smile to myself and whisper. This is the life I choose now. And maybe, just maybe, this is what freedom sounds like. If Margaret's story touched your heart, please take a moment to support this channel. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions help us keep sharing powerful stories like hers, stories of resilience, healing, and rediscovering self-worth. If you've faced something similar, know you're not alone. Share your experience in the comments, your voice might be the light someone else needs tonight. And if this story helped you, consider sharing it with a friend who might need hope. Together, we can build a community where no one suffers in silence. Subscribe now, and let's keep walking this road of healing, side by side.